Buenas tardes a todos. Horacio Benito de Argentina.
Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. Have...
Hey, Luis.
Hello, Luis.
Hello, guys and girls. Let's see, we have 30 something people already. Let's give it just one more minute. I can start just with the basic rules of engagement, how this training will work. Then I'll hand it over to Sabi. Okay, let's get going then. Again, thank you guys for joining this first basic Python training session. I'll just go over some rules of engagement before we get started. Okay. First of all, I will start the recording here. As most of you are familiar with the Talk Fridays, for example, or any other transfer of knowledge session that we do. We're going to make this this available, both the material and the recordings, right, as well as the attendance as well. I like to put the attendance as part of the material that we share with you guys. It will be shared after the presentations. So let's go quickly over the rules of engagement. So this is a little different than the regular transfer of knowledge sessions that we do. So this is a proper training. So we're going to have multiple sessions there. We're going to have 9 days with Sabi being the presenter for this basic Python training. So 1 hour every day. So I just ask you guys to be as committed as possible. We know that nine days of training sometimes is hard to get that hour for all the 9 days, but try to do that as much as possible. All the materials and the topics are progressive, so every session there will build on top of the previous session. So as much as you guys can be committed, the better it will be for you. Okay. Because of the amount of people, right? So we have over 70 attendees now. For any questions, either raise your hand or put it in the chat or use the Q&A. This is just to avoid the crosstalk that is the next topic there, to avoid the crosstalk and all people talking to each other during the training. But we will also want to make this as interactive as possible. So if you do have questions that you want to ask yourself, not using the chat or the Q&A, please raise your hand and Sabi will take a look at that and answer as soon as possible. Okay. The mute button is there. Thank you all. You're all already muted, which is awesome. Again, the material and recordings will be made available, so the link is already there. So you guys should have access to the Automation Learning Path program website, right? And all the links will be there. But again, I encourage you to be on these live learning sessions, so you can ask questions right as they appear to Sabi. Additional materials also there. So Sabi prepared a bunch of cool videos, YouTube videos that will help you guys through this basic Python program, giving you additional material for you to watch in your free time. We know that you probably don't have much free time, but that's up to you. That's very cool material that Sabi prepared and very useful to this specific training. So we're going to have a quiz and a feedback to be sent after the training. So I'll send you guys the link after we have done with all the sessions there. There will be a quiz just to evaluate if the knowledge that you acquire here is actually being granted and being used for the quiz, and also the feedback to see where we can improve and things that we can change and whatever you want to tell us about this program. And of course, last but not least, be respectful. So Sabi is not gaining anything to do this training for us. So it's something that we try to build inside the Americas RBC to build that additional knowledge for all of you. And hopefully by the end of this, we're going to have additional trainings to build also on top of the basic Python. We're going to have Ansible. We're going to have Jinja templates and YAML and a lot of things building on top of this basic Python. But hopefully this will be just the first stepping stone for you guys, right? So thank you again for joining this, and Sabi, you can take it over, man.
Hey, thank you, Luis. So good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
You're audible. Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, let's start then. So everyone able to view my screen, right?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So so my name is Sabi, and we'll be going through the automation training for next 9 days, right? And before we start with the automation, before we start with Python automation, basically, why the requirement is why automation is needed, right? So we'll see that what is the reason that Python is required? Why not other Golang, or you can say that why not Ansible, right? And before that, why we will use Python? What is the requirement of it? As we are moving towards the programmable age, so what is the need of automation? What is the need of orchestration as a framework? Correct. So whenever we talk about programmability, basically it will solve that how we can manage devices and how we can achieve the organizational goals, such as doing the configuration whenever you are doing any kind of integration, right? So based on this, how we are doing it before. So we'll start with the legacy stuff. Based on the legacy traditional method, you can say that the device configuration, when a network engineer do it, first of all, it needs to be connects to a device using the SSH telnet ports, then configure the device, copy the configuration in a notepad, search for the configuration in the variables, and then you need to connect the device and copy and edit the configuration, right? This is the way that we do it. So for quite some time, we are using this process for many years, and the reason why we look at the problem is it is a error prone when we are talking about doing any kind of automation, right? So whenever in a device perspective, are you able to see my screen, everyone, right? And my cursor as well.
Yes.
So from a traditional perspective, right? You are as a network engineer, you are trying to configure a device one by one. And when we are trying to configure the device one by one, it might be an error prone that we are getting. And also a lot of configuration tasks. When think about like you are configuring hundreds of thousands of devices. Or think about you are transforming a configuration from a different vendor to Nokia. So this is where we will use the programmable stuff to do it. And when we talk about the stuff what we were doing in terms of traditional way, it is a error prone and it is a repeatable task that is needed, right? So we can say that it's a slow and it is not optimal for the large network that is we are looking for. And also it's error as well. There is error means whenever you are doing with a lot of configuration stuff, manually you will find any kind of error in that. You will encounter error in that as well. So in order to solve that, in 1988, generally SNMP introduced. And when in terms of SNMP, it is basically used to manage the machines. And it also SNMP is also written in order to configure the device as well. But the main goal is of the SNMP is to do the configuration stuff, no, do the manageability stuff, not the configuration, do the monitoring perspective. It's not widely popular based on the configuration. So later point of time, so what we need to do in order to solve the problem, right? So when we talk about a network management perspective, and when we talk about how we can solve the problem and how we can save our time, reduce the human errors, increase innovation in our network, right? In that case, we need to consider, for example, in terms of doing an automation kind of thing, we are dealing with a small network first. When we're dealing with a small network perspective, we can do like configuration routing protocol. You can say STP configuration. You can say security policies. You can say cost segmentation, MPLS. You do the configuration, but what will happen when in terms of network will grow? Whenever we are talking about a network is growing, what the problem that we face generally? So might be the engineer will encounter with an error with this while configuring the network using any kind of manual intervention. So later point of time, bash script introduced, right? So bash script introduced with doing the automation of the devices. But when we talk about bash script, so in that case, it is not optimal to use the services in order to configure using bash. Then we introduce with the configuration management tools. The configuration management tools, you can say that is Ansible. So Ansible is a configuration management tool in which we will able to see that. One second. So when we talk about the configuration management tool that we will be using is basically we are using Ansible in terms of configuration management tool, or other tools that is available is Python, Perl scripts and all. So under the hood, when we talk about Ansible, so Ansible is also a Python script in under the hood, right? And when we are talking about any kind of automation using Ansible, Python, Perl script, so there is no strategy to it. Only talking about a automation that we can do the automation using Ansible or Python. There is no kind of framework that has been exist, right? There is no strategy. So in order to look at the strategy perspective, we need to know about what is the network programmability as a whole. We need to think about a framework. And based on this framework, what all network programmability will give us, it will basically save time and money, because automation reduce the infrastructure complexity. It will give us few hours are required for the configuring and provisioning any kind of device. In terms of human error, we can say about we can remove the chance of human errors. We can deliver the higher level of services in more consistent way, right? We can increase the innovation as well in terms of doing that. Like we can deploy the automation, and based on this automation, we can say that we can run based on the time to the market, based like configuring a device, doing integration, doing design stuff. So this all introduced with the help of network programmability, not with the automation. And later point of time, we will have a great insight of our network. So basically, what is the insight that we need? So automation helps the IT operation team to get the analytics of the entire topology that we are working on. And it will give you a great strategic workforce as well in order to do that, right? So what is network programmability is? So network programmability is divided in two parts. One is your automation perspective and other is orchestration. So when we talk about automation, we can accomplish by using a repeatable task using any kind of configuration management tool such as Python or Ansible, right? Or what is orchestration? Orchestration which combines the series of tasks that we are doing it. So combination of automation and orchestration, which gives us network programmability to do it, right? And there comes, when we talk about automation and orchestration, the programmability word will exist. And now when we talk about the programmability, right, then there comes your intent driven and how we can connect the device, right? How the device will be connected. And based on the device connectivity, now there is no machine, there is no human intervention in this. We are talking about an API when two different applications are talking to each other, right? Application programming interface, which gives us the connectivity in terms of connecting two devices or connecting two applications. So when we're talking about this from a programmability perspective, now we are connecting our device using any kind of APIs. For example, we can use netconf, we can use restconf, right? And then further it grows with a controller perspective. We will have an application which will give us an UI perspective. And based on this application, it will talk to a controller, and controller is generally do the configuration perspective of our devices. So if you look at it, we have two different northbound and southbound APIs needed to be connected. So from a controller perspective, if controller is the center, then in order to look at the UI or the application, it can set to be as a northbound API. And based on the connectivity of the northbound API, or whenever you connect an HTTP based UI, means what you are using a browser, and in order to use that, you will use HTTP or HTTPS, right? So for the HTTP and HTTP transport protocol, we are using what netconf. So we will go in detail of these APIs as well. I'm just giving you a high level overview of how these things are connected to the network. And when we are talking in terms of a controller, which is responsible to do the configuration of your infrastructure device, which is responsible to collect the log information. So this is, I'm talking about when we are having an orchestrator, or when we are talking about any kind of framework, like for example, we are talking about NSP, right? So NSP, which will give us a UI perspective for a user, right? From a user, you will get a GUI, and from the GUI, you will instruct, or you will send the intent based automation to the infrastructure layer, right? And what we are following here, we are following an SDN approach, right? When we are talking about an SDN approach, the SDN approach is divided basically in three parts, right? One is the management layer. Second is your control layer. And third is your infra layer. Let me open the whiteboard. Oh, give me 1 minute. Sorry for that. So whenever we are talking about network programmability, right, from where that comes from. So we need to look at like an SDN approach. When you are talking about an SDN approach, basically that SDN divides the plane in three parts. One is your management plane. The second one is your control plane, right? Or you can say the controller part. And third one is your infra part of it. Infra part where your devices are stored and where your network topology is. And from a controller and management, you can say that together the control plane and the management plane will be clubbed. Like we can say that NSP is a controller in which we can do the intent-based networking in this. So what is happening? So we have a SDN approach where we do a intent-based, from where we are talking from a UI perspective, right? From this, we are instructing that to the infra layer, we can configuring the devices. At the same time, we are managing the devices as well. For example, we are pushing the configuration and we are managing the analytics. We are doing the telemetry stuff from this, which is doing the log collection of it. So whenever we are talking about this, so we have two APIs. One is your northbound API and another from a controller to the infrastructure perspective, we will have a southbound API, right? So when we talk about southbound API, generally the southbound API talks with a netconf transport or gRPC transport, right? From a northbound perspective, we will have REST API. So REST API in order to do a transport with the help of HTTPS. So these are the transport mechanism that we have in our network programmability, right? And then from this, we will have different encoding structure, how we are sending the data in order to get the configuration done, or how we are sending the log information from the network infrastructure to the NSP or to the controller perspective or to a SDN open source. So how that is need to be visualized in a graphical UI, right? So we need something called as transport. For example, think about a BGP, right? In order to connect BGP between two different routers, what do we need? We need BGP to be established. But BGP relies on what? BGP relies on the TCP protocol. So TCP is your transport. Similarly, when we talk about any kind of programmability, when API talks to each other, we need a transport for that. That is what we can say, that either we can go with netconf, gRPC, we can go with REST API. And what kind of data, whenever you are sending any kind of data, right? So what kind of data, how we'll send those data in the transport? We have different kind of encoding mechanisms. That is what XML we will have. We'll have JSON and we'll have protobuf. So we'll see each of these in our upcoming classes, but I'm just giving you a brief introduction about the programmability stuff. Any questions anyone is having? Anyone any questions?
No, from my end.
No, thanks.
I'll keep an eye on the Q&A, Sabi.
Okay, so based on this an SDN approach, so we are looking at from an application perspective. From a northbound, we are using a REST-conf API, and then from a southbound, when we are doing any kind of configuring the device, configuring our infrastructure layer, or whenever we are collecting any kind of information, for example, logs or any kind of telemetry information, that is where we use gRPC, right? Then comes what is an API. So whenever we talk to each other, right? For example, we talk, let's say an application, or you can say you are using Uber service, right? When you are using Uber service, Uber is doing two things. One, from a GPS, it is from an application perspective, it is talking to a GPS integrating with the Uber app, right? So that means two different applications, when they talk to each other, we refer to that as an API, which is an application programming interface, which will give you a faster prototyping on which do not build the communication from scratch in order to have a communication between two different applications. Okay, so whenever a client wants to communicate with our device from a server perspective, from a client as a device, so we need an API, and that API should be there in your device side of it. And that device side of it, either you are initiating that, right? Either you are doing, for example, you are doing a push model, and in that push model, what you are doing, you are pushing information to the device, or you can say that you are doing a pull information, right? Whenever we talk about any kind of automation, two things that we do, right? Either we do a push model or we do a push model, right? Push or we do pull. So push as in we are doing a configuring the device, right? Pull as in we are getting the log information from the device. Two things we can automate, right? Either we configure a device in a programmable way, or we can say using automation, or we can get the information of the device. Two things that we do in terms of when we talk about automation, right? So let's talk about. So this is what we can say about, like, this is what we refer to as a programmability, right? Now, programmability is what we are referring. One is the orchestration plane, and another is your automation, right? Now we'll see that the automation side of it and how we will go ahead and do the automation with the help of our automation configuration tools that is available. Whether it's, you can say that whether it's a Python, or you can say Ansible, or you can say Golang, whatever automation language that you want to look at or you want to learn, you can go ahead. And the simplest way in order to do the automation, we can say that we can use either Ansible or Python. Oh. So the question is now, when we talk about programmability, right, we need a framework. Based on this framework, our automation is there and orchestration is there. So network programmability divide in two parts of it, automation and orchestration. So whenever we talk about automation, so which programming language comes to your mind first, right? we as a network engineer always we think about Python. So Python is basically been developed by Guido van Rossum in 1991. And basically the philosophy of Python is we need to have a simple programmer language and which can helps to read and write, right? Which will be easier to read and write. And this will be the #1 programming language based on IEEE Spectrum. And whenever we talk about an automation, we can do the automation using Ansible as a client serverless. We can use client and server model like Puppet. We can help, these tools helps to automate, but under the hood of Ansible, we'll have Python, right? So whenever we talk about a Python, so Python is which language Python is? Python is a interpreted language or Python is a compiler language? Anyone can explain about it? Anyone?
For as far as I know, a compile language, you need to create an executable file, a make file before you can actually execute that language, right?
Yes. So basically, when we talk about a programmable interpreted language and a programmable language, right? Many books will give us an idea about that Python is an interpreted language at a high level. But however, when we talk about Python, Python is basically a compiled as well as programmable language both. It's an interpreted language as well as it do compilation as well. So when we run a Python script, for example, I will print hello world, the first Python script, right? So it does not get translated into machine instruction for the CPU to execute it first, right? It transport into byte codes. First of all, your source code will do a compilation, and based on that, it will convert into byte code. Based on byte code, your virtual machine will convert those to a machine code or binary code to execute the Python code. So in total, Python is both a compiler as well as interpreter. So interpreter means you can execute line by line, but it is not, compilation does not means that it is like C++. So C++, C++ executes basically based on the sequential steps that we have, right? So Python is both a compiler as well as interpreted language. So Python generally converts that to the code into byte codes, and the byte codes is in your virtual machine, which running the byte code for a platform, which makes that a platform independent. So that Python you can run in any platform like Linux, you can run in Windows, we can run in Mac OS, right? And then based on this, we can say that Python is a object-oriented programming language. So what is object-oriented programming language? So basically, it is provide you an object in which we can structure and then we can bundle it together and which will behave as the same pattern. For example, when we talk about a blueprint, right? We created a blueprint. For example, we created a blueprint to manufacture a car, and that blueprint is being used to create multiple cars with different behaviors. For example, different behavior as in what is the color of the car, right? What variant it will be. So that particular blueprint will be used in different objects. So this is why Python is called as a object-oriented programming. And then taking the advantage of this, it will be easier to maintain and improve the software development productivity. Right. So we will, for example, the object oriented, we can say that we will have a dog will have a property, and based on this property, it will have a name, it will have a breed, color, behavior. And based on this breed, color, behavior, we can say that we will go ahead and create different blueprints of this, and then we can create different classes from a perspective of object oriented, and it will use multiple times. which we can say that we can relate the properties and behavior of an individual object, and then we can use those objects in our programming to take the advantage of improve the program in our day-to-day coding structures, right? Whenever we talk about Python first started with Python 2.0, introduced in 2000, and the version was 2.7 and released in 2010. And then 3.0 released till we are running now 3.11, even 3.12 is also coming. So whenever we talk about two different versions, so it's a backward compatibility, and 2.7 is already been end of life in 2020. And whenever we talk about Python language, it will give us a rich and diverse developer ecosystems that will avoid starting from the scratch. And whenever we talk about Python, even in order to start Python, it's a great place to see these style guides and the Zen of Python. So PEP 8 and PEP 20 is being used, which provides the documentation we can refer to as an RFC based on any protocol that we are running, right? So we need to refer these as a RFC based in our Python. So PEP 8 and PEP 20 is being used widely in order to follow the style guide, you can say that. And this is based on design by the Python community. And in terms of the programming, it referred to as IEEE RFC that we are referring for our any of the protocol that we want to learn. And whenever we talk about Python, in order to run it, from where we will run this. So there are 4 different ways we can run this. One is the interactive shell. We will have terminal, we will have ID, we will have file manager, right? So interactive shell allows you to execute line by line, which you can say that IPython, we can say that IPython and CPython in order to run our codes. When we talk about terminals, it can be a Windows or a Linux terminal which can execute our Python scripts directly. And ID is a software in which we can refer to as a VS Code or PyCharm or Spider. And then we will run those code there. And the file manager is basically which allows you to execute your script by having a script icon and then double clicking in this, and then you can execute those. So Python is generally an interpreted language, and we can execute these language in line by line. And based on this, we will have some method that is called as REPL, right? So when we execute these codes, right, we use this REPL process. So the process R stands for read the user input, evaluate it, print it, and then if needed, then loop back to step 1. So
Sabi, I think there's a question.
Yeah.
Yusuf, I think Yusuf has a question.
Yeah, thanks, Louis. Just a couple of questions, actually. So the most commonly version to be used in your previous slide would be version 3. So if we're going to start writing Python scripts, for example, would be recommended to use version 3, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And for the IDE, which software would you recommend to write Python programs? Would be the easiest to use?
Basically, when we talk about IDs, right? So in terms of when you use ID, you will have options. Like, for example, you will have an option of writing a script in PyCharm. You will have an option to use VS Code. You will have an option to use Spider. So in general, what task that you are executing, right? You are trying to execute, for example, integration perspective, you are trying to execute a configuration from a device, pushing that to a device, pushing that from a ID to your network devices, right? What kind of task that you are going with? Based on those tasks, you can use those kind of IDs, right? Everyone will give the same feeling. Let me open that. Give me 1 minute. So for example, if I talk about PyCharm, so this is my PyCharm, and one minute. So let me share again. So when we talk about Spider, so this is my IDE for Spider, right? Which will give us, see the difference, which will give us both an interactive session in which I can write, for example, directly I can write and I can test my Python script here.
Right.
Right. So this is one way to do it. Another way is, for example, you will have VS Code. So VS Code will give us both. Either you will write your script here, or you can say that you can go to the terminal and then do the interactive session, and then you can test and you can write it over here. And then the second one is the PyCharm. So when we talk about PyCharm, PyCharm will also give the same way like VS Code, but VS Code, you can say that the faster way to execute any of the Python scripts is to use Spider and then VS Code. And then we will have PyCharm. So PyCharm is basically been used to practice Python codes, and then you can execute that within the same thing. For example, if I take one script and then if I want to run it, you will see that you will get the information over here, right? You can get the information over here, but there is, you also go to the terminal session from this, and then you can run your IPython or interactive session here. But the best way to use is Spider, in which you can run your script, you can execute your script, as well as you will have interactive sessions so that you can write your script, test it, and then you can do it further. So that depends on a developer, which tool you are comfortable with.
With the interactive, because Python as well, it comes with its own like IDE as well, that is similar to the one that you're showing right now in Spider, where it is interactive, so it executes like line by line, for example.
Yeah, that execute line by line if you go to your command prompt and write Python, right? So that you will also get that, but the feeling of it will not be as good it is, right?
Right.
Or you can say also Windows shell also you can use it. So that depends.
Right, and they're all free that we can actually download like a trial version, for example, or something like that. Or does it
all
require
are community
purchasing?
edition? Yeah, all community editions are free. All enterprise are means paid version. So, but all community edition will have all the extensions, everything.
Got it. Okay, great. Thank you.
But in general, when you will use in order to write any kind of, for example, you are writing a YAML script, you are writing a JSON file, the best way to use is basically your VS Code. So using VS Code, you can write your scripts over there, and you will have different extension to it. So that based on this extension, you can, if you are writing a Jinja template, you will use this extension and you can write the Jinja template based on the indentation and all, right?
Right. Okay, got it. Thank you.
So whenever you are writing different, for example, different file formats, YAML or JSON or XML, or for example, you are writing a Jinja template, right? So better way to use this one, the VS Code.
The VS Code. Okay.
Yes. And using VS Code also, you can integrate many extension in order to do the coding stuff.
And if
generally, the developer use this. Yes.
Right. No, sorry. I was just going to say, if the extension is Py, then I can run it or use any of the softwares that you mentioned before.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Great. Thanks.
Is the VS Code free?
Yeah. Sorry.
The VS Code, is it free? You
Yeah,
have to get a
generally I
license for-
use VS Code. Sometimes I try with Spider as well, but Spider whenever means it's a heavy software basically. So VS Code is lighter one. Then, and if you are starting with Python, I would say you can also use PyCharm to do it. So PyCharm is you write the code and then execute directly. So for example, it's easier as well, right? User friendly.
Yeah, do we need a license for VS Code? License is not required, right?
Not required. Nothing. So none of these ID need license. All are community edition. So generally, if you ask, I started using first PyCharm and then I gradually migrate to the VS Code. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, we are talking about REPL. So that process, REPL process is being used when you are entering anything in the interactive shell, and the interactive shell is giving you what? Line by line, right? Based on this line by line execution, we will give R as in read, then evaluate, then we'll print, and then loop back to the read step. So whenever we are executing Python code, it goes through this process. And whenever you are going through an interactive shell, you can directly go to your CMD, write the Python, and based on this, you will land it up with this. And here also you can do the same thing, right? Okay. So this is all about the introduction to Python that we have. And then we will say that we will, in order to still, Luis, we still have time, or we'll start the data structure.
Sorry, yeah, we still have time for we have 20 minutes.
Okay. So let's start with the data structures that we have. So before that, let me get the slides here. So whenever we talk about the data, so what we are doing, we are, oh, 1 minute. I think I need to change the screen. Are you able to see my screen now?
No.
Not yet.
No.
No. Not yet?
Not yet.
No.
1 minute. Now?
No, try to share it again
No.
because it's not even showing it's trying to share it. Okay. Yeah, that was good.
Is it fine now?
It's okay.
Okay. So yeah.
Yes.
So whenever we are talking about Python, right? So Python, we are talking Python because we want to do automation, right? And when we talk about automation, what we are doing, we are manipulating with the data, right? We need data either from the device or we create data from ourselves with the help of templating or whatever it is, right? So that data is being divided in two types in general. We can say that one is your primitive data type and the other one is non-primitive data types. So whenever we talk about primitive data types, so generally primitive data types are integers, float, complex, Boolean, or strings. And whenever we are talking about non-primitive, so those are like lists, tuples, dictionary, and sets. So what do you mean by primitive and non-primitive? Right. So whenever we talk about an integer, float, string, Boolean, these are all stored in a single value, right? And based on these are all stored in single value, these values cannot be mute, right? We cannot change those values. These are all immutable, right? These are not mutable values. And whenever we change, whenever we try to change a string, we will have a different memory allocation for that. So that is the reason why it is called as primitive. And when we talk about non-primitive, so basically non-primitives are also comprised of primitive values as well. But the main distinction between a non-primitive is we can do nesting in this. We can do like list under the list. We can do tuple under tuple, list under dictionary. So these are what referred to as non-primitive. But again, these data types are basically divided in 4 parts. One is the number, in where we'll store the integers in the positive and a negative value, where we'll store the floats in terms of decimal values, where, for example, we are using complex numbers. So complex numbers are basically imaginary numbers, and also sometimes we use those in our machine learning language in using Python. Even when we are talking about network automation, we use complex numbers as well. Then comes sequence. So sequence are order collection of data, and based on this, we can iterate these based on these data, right? And we can say that strings are sequence are divided in strings. We can say that sequence are list, sequence are tuples, sequence are sets. And then comes our dictionary. So dictionary, where we'll keep the values, the key and value pairs, right? So key and value pairs, you can say that we will have a router host name, right? Host name is, let's say, lab. In the router, host name is lab. So we will have a key as router, and then host name as, for example, key as host name and value as what? The lab. Similarly, we'll have password. Password is equals to lab123. So key is password, and the value of that is lab123. Similarly, we will have something called as Boolean. Boolean are basically true and false. So these are being used to evaluate the expression whenever we have a code. And whenever we have a code, whenever we, for example, write hello world, and that hello world is true to that, then it will able to print. For example, that is not present, that variable is not there, and it is false. So it will not going to print the value. So generally, Booleans are being used in our Yang models as well. Based on that, we'll say that whether it's true or false. It's the one single value that we'll mention about it, right? So the data structure divides in 4 parts of it: numbers, sequence, dictionary, and Booleans. And then we will have sets. So sets are being used as a unique, in order to store the value as unique, and there is no duplicate values. When we compare with list and tuples, so lists are mutable. We can change the value of the list, and list contains duplicate values as well. When we talk about tuples are basically immutable data structures. We cannot change that. If we want to change it, then it will have a different memory locations like strings. So first thing, whenever we write a code, right? So let me get this. So first thing, whenever we write a code in our Python, so what we do, first program that we write is we write what? We write hello world, right? So when we write hello world, so what things we are doing there? We are, 1 minute. So whenever we are writing a code, print hello world. So here, what we are doing? We are doing using a print function, built-in function, and we are writing something within the quotes, right? So basically what we are doing 2 things. We are using a built-in function first, and then we are writing a string in order to get it print. So anything, whenever we write inside a inverted comma, right? So this is what refers to as string. And based on this string, we will able to either we can, for example, x equals to, we can have hello world in single inverted comma. And if you type that x, we will get the hello world. For example, we change that to x equals to ABC, right? In ABC. And now we'll type that x. So it will give us the value as ABC. What that means? So at first instance, we stored in our first memory location about in Python is hello world, right? This is one location that we'll have. So, and then we change that variable to ABC as strings are immutable. So this value and this value are different. So if I do an ID of X, for example, it will give us a value of, let's say 5408, which is the memory location to store X value, and X is what ABC, right? For example, now what I do, I change it to hello world. And now it will print what? Now it will change the value to hello world. Do you think that it will store in the same location? No, it will not. So basically, it will not store in the same location. It will have a different memory location. So these two variables, X with a different strings, we will storing those values in a different memory locations. So whenever we write any Python code, so whenever we write print hello world, we are using a Python, we're using a built-in function in order to print anything. And what we are printing a string, and that string always be inside a single inverted comma or double or triple, single or double triple, right? When we have multiple lines of string, then we use those. But these values are being stored in a memory location where we are executing it. And then we will say that what is the type of it? What is the type of X is? So the type of X is what is said to be a string. So that means this value, which is inside an inverted comma, will be a string. So for example, A equals to, I will mention 10. So now A equals to 10. 10 is an integer, right? So, but when I type, what is the type of A? It is now string. So whatever you write inside a string, whatever you write inside a inverted comma, so that is what we refer to as string, whether you write a float, integer, number, whatever it is, but it is inside a string, inside the quotes. Yeah, Luis.
So I think one of the things there that we can derive is you don't need to declare the type of what you're writing, right? The system is interpreting based on the value, right?
Right.
So we don't actually have to declare X as being a string. The system is interpreting based on the value of X that it is a string.
Right. So anything whenever we write in terms of a inverted comma for this, then system is interpreting that as a string. For example, if I write A equals to 10, right? Now the value of A is a integer. So the reason is because we are not changing the value. So if I have in this format, then Python knows this is a string. Anything which comes up to me in this format is a string. Anything which comes up to me in this format without any quotes, then it's an integer. Right?
Perfect.
So we'll see tomorrow. We'll see that we'll go through that string, and next Wednesday I think we'll have class. So we'll go through the string and we'll see that which all methods, which all functions that we'll be using, what is indexing and all in strings, and then further we'll start with. Any questions?
No question for me.
So able to means yeah.
I have a quick question, Sabashasi.
Sure.
When we have any variable in codes that would be a string, and let's say we have a same variable with different value, and as you mentioned, right, it will be stored in a different memory location. So now if we try to print that, so it would always print from the last memory location. Is that what I'm understanding correctly?
So for example, you have a variable x1, right? And I will have x1 as hello. Correct? And then if I'll see the memory location of this, this is what 21968, right?
Right.
Now, what is your question? So if
my
I
question-
change the X1,
Yeah, if we change the X1 to, let's say, XYZ or ABC, as you
Let's say
as you
10.
read, 10, okay. And so now the memory location would change, right?
yes, now the
And
memory location is changed.
correct. So now if we print X1, it will
Mhm.
print 10 and not hello, right?
Yeah.
So this is always the case, or is there a way to print the different memory location one that is hello?
It's always the case. So whenever
Okay.
you change that variable, it will be changed.
Okay, so what about that memory location? Is that something that would be deleted or
It will be
refreshed?
released.
Released, okay.
Yes, this is the reason why Python is a lightweight, and whenever you change the variable, this memory location has been released, and then new one will be assigned.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay.
Any other questions?
I'm good. Thanks.
Yeah, I don't think, yeah, no questions on the Q&A and in the chat. I think everyone is okay for now. So we talk again on Wednesday, right? We have the second session there on Wednesday. Thank you everyone for attending this one. We talk again on Wednesday, and thank you, Sabi.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
guys.
Thank you.
Luis.
Thank you so much, guys. Bye-bye.
Nice to
Thank
meet
you.
you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.